Good evening and welcome everyone. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes to make sure everybody who's joining today can finish logging into this call. I think we're ready to go now. Welcome to this East West Railway Company online public event for Clapham Green to the Eversdens East. My name is Claire Keith Anderson and I'm the Community Engagement Manager here at East West Railway Company. Following the launch of the second round of non-statutory consultation on the 31st of March, this week we're holding the second round of online events or webinars. The focus of this evening's session is on responding to the questions raised by communities to date. For those wanting more detailed dialogue with specialists from the project team, please attend any of our live chat events. There are 2 to 3 sessions per week, 10 in total, between now and the end of the consultation. This evening, we will start with a quick run through of what we're consulting on in your area, but the focus of the event is on responding to questions raised to date by yourselves. We are holding similar sessions across the whole route between Oxford and Cambridge throughout this week. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce you to the rest of the team. Today we also have our Strategy Director, Will Gallagher, our Senior Programme Manager for Connection Stage 3, Jeff Leffick, our Head of Environment, Michael Shanks, our Head of Operations, Maria Cliff, and our Land and Property Manager, Jan Pace. Before we start with the presentation, I'm going to run through a brief housekeeping and Teams Live note. Many of you might be familiar with Teams Live, but just as a reminder, you'll be on mute throughout. Please note that we're recording these sessions and therefore will not reference any names or descriptions we have been given for GDPR reasons. That's all the housekeeping over with. Now over to you, Will.
Thank you very much, Claire, and good evening, everyone. And we are very grateful for you joining us this evening. First, just to say something a little bit about this event. We're running this as an hour-long webinar, and the key sort of purpose of this event is to provide you with a bit more information about the public consultation, so some explanation of what's in the consultation documents, but then particularly to address the key themes and issues and questions that have emerged from the first webinar when we spoke to you last month, and those questions that we've had coming in more generally as well. And then specifically highlighting how to get involved in the consultation as it continues. I think the one thing to stress is that we are dealing here with sort of the key themes and the questions that have already been raised with us, and there are kind of clear themes in those that we will be responding to. But if you have a specific question that you want answering, then actually attending one of our live chat events, and you can see them there on the right hand side, between 2 and 3 every week, where you can go online and chat directly with our experts. That is the best place to get your personal specific questions answered, as I say, directly by our experts. This evening's session is mainly about answering sort of in broad themes the questions and the challenges and those sorts of things that people have raised so far. So really just to emphasize, the slight different purposes between the events that we're holding to make sure we give people the kind of information that they need and the opportunities to ask the questions that they want. As we move on to the next slide, what are we going to cover today? So that will really be the quick recap on what we're consulting on. Spending most of our time today answering the questions that we've received, also then explaining how to get involved and a quick explanation as to what comes next as well. So as we move on to the next slide, you don't really need me to tell you what East West Rail is. but for those of you who are coming to the scheme new, it is a proposed rail link that would connect communities between Oxford, Milton Keynes, Bedford and Cambridge. That is a connection that was lost some time ago in the late 60s, sort of following the sort of pattern of beaching closures, and it's a connection that we are looking to reinstate to drive the economic growth and prosperity of people, of communities between Oxford and Cambridge. So as I move on to the next slide, I'm going to hand over to Maria, who'll talk to you about the details of the consultation.
Thanks, Will, and good evening, everybody. My name is Maria Cliff, and I'm Head of Operations for East West Railway. And the consultation itself is predominantly split into two different sections. So the documentation initially focuses on our customer experience and railway operations, and then our infrastructure development, which is split into 6 sections. So I'll very briefly talk you through our approach to the customer experience and railway operations section. We've asked a number of questions in the documents with a view that we really want to hear what the future customers of this railway line think. So we want to know what people will use this railway for, be it to get to work or to visit friends and family or for leisure purposes. And there's several elements of the journey, the end-to-end customer journey, that we want to learn more about your expectations of. Those sections cover the train service itself, so the number of trains that will run and where those trains will call. We've asked questions about our stations, so not just the facilities and your experience at the station, but how you get to the station and how we provide connectivity into other modes of transport, be it buses or cycleways or walkways. We're also keen to hear your views about our trains. So in terms of our plan for the rolling stock, we are going to have an interim fleet of trains, which allow us to get our connection stage 1 up and running as soon as possible. We've got 3 connection stages as we propose to gradually open the railway between Oxford and Cambridge. And we've got a real opportunity with our long-term fleet to look not just at sustainable ways to power that fleet, but the actual facilities that we offer you on board as well. We want to know about your expectations from the colleagues and the staff that you meet on our railway and where you want those interactions to take place, because we know that a personal touch can really make all the difference to people's experience as they make their way through their journey. And finally, the customer information that you expect at all of the different stages of your journey, be it from planning your journey and buying your ticket right the way through to post journey. So that's the customer experience and railway operations section, and then today we're focused on section D of the infrastructure, and as you can see, the infrastructure itself is split into 6 different sections geographically, but we'll talk you through some more detail a little bit later in the presentation around section D amongst other areas. So I'm now going to hand over. Thank you very much for your time. Back to you, Will.
Thanks very much, Maria. And this is the new section of railway, as I think Maria might have said, sort of connecting from the north of Bedford across to where we sort of take a common route down to the King's Cross line and then up into Cambridge. And as you can see, we have developed a series of route alignments, and they run between sort of some key station locations. So 2 key points on the East Coast Main Line, whether we're serving Tempsford or whether we're serving St Neots. And you'll notice that there are 2 options at Tempsford and 2 options at St Neots. That's mainly to do with the engineering in those particular areas, but you can see that those that serve Tempsford come out of Bedford and take a more southerly route across to Tempsford, and those that serve St Neots come out of Bedford and take a more northerly route across towards the East Coast main line. As we then head across, we have alignments that head both from Tempsford and from St Neots up and follow the A428, the new A428 corridor, and serve Camborne North before heading into Cambridge. We also have stations, alignment options that run from St Neots and Tempsford that serve Camborne South. And in some instances, you can see there are those that serve Camborne South by either taking the A428 route to the north or cutting across country, as you can see with the mustard and blue routes between Tempsford and St Neots and Camborne South there. So a set of route alignment options that we are consulting on. We have established two emerging preferences. The first goes from St Neots South and follows the A428 alignment across to Camborne North, and the second, Route 9, goes from Tempsford and then follows the A428 alignment to Camborne North. So in short, Camborne North is our preferred location in Camborne, whereas in Tempsford and St Neots we're not yet able to express a preference, and our analysis on that is still underway. Those are, as I say, emerging preferences, but we are consulting on all 5 shortlisted options, both in terms of Camborne South and in terms of Camborne North. So we would invite your feedback on those 2 station locations, amongst other things. So if we head on to the next slide, I'm going to hand over to Michael shortly, because this is the opportunity for us to cover the key questions and the key themes that have been coming up in the consultation so far, so that we can then, as I say, address some of those and answer your questions. So over to you, Michael, on I think environment questions that are coming first.
Thanks. So yes, I really want to take the opportunity to spend a few minutes just telling you a bit about the approach we're taking to environment, and then deal with some key questions that are coming through from the feedback so far. As I said, I'm Michael Shanks, and I'm Head of Environment, and I think it would be worth starting with our environmental principles. These are reflected in our environmental sustainability policy, and we're striving to deliver against those. I really want to just take a bit of time to share a bit more about our approach to delivering against those. So in terms of carbon, we are aiming to deliver a net zero carbon railway. That will be in line with existing and developing net zero carbon policy legislation commitments. And you may be aware that the UK government has a commitment to reach net zero carbon by 2050. And also at more local level, Bedford Borough Council has pledged to become carbon neutral by 2030, and Cambridge City Council has declared similar net zero carbon aspirations. So as a project, we'll need to demonstrate that we will not have a material impact on the ability of government to meet its carbon targets. And so it's a really important issue for us that we're working really hard on at the moment. Looking at biodiversity net gain, under consent for connection stage 1, we committed to a 10% biodiversity net gain for that part of the scheme. And so in keeping with that, and of course with current and developing government policy for biodiversity net gain, we've stated that we'll achieve biodiversity net gain during the construction of the rest of the current project. And really do this by avoiding high value and priority habitats, looking to enhance existing habitats and create new habitats, which kind of links nicely to the next point, which is around the sensitive approach we're taking to developing route alignments. We're really looking to follow the environmental mitigation hierarchy, and by that I mean we're seeking first of all to avoid significant adverse effects, and where that's not possible, we'll seek to reduce and then mitigate impacts. And of course, if necessary, then we can look at compensation requirements as a last resort. Given the stage of the project we're at, we're really currently primarily focused on trying to avoid and minimise impact. and in doing so, really trying to make decisions that help us design out the potential environmental impacts. So as an example for that, with alignments that we've developed, which we're consulting on at the moment, we've avoided direct impacts on some key national features. That includes things such as ancient woodland, listed buildings, registered parks and gardens. But we're also working hard to try and avoid other environmental sites like priority habitats and reducing other impacts on, for example, landscape through sensitive design. Flooding is also important, and we're developing our resilience and mitigating flood risk by looking at project-related risks linked to climate change and really considering the changes to climatic conditions with the design of the project. So we'll look to incorporate uplifts to take into account changing climate in our flood risk that we'll undertake as part of the scheme. And work's very much ongoing in this area. We've established and have ongoing and regular engagement with the Environment Agency. That's to share information, data and modelling to support this work. Next slide, please. Turning to sustainable energy for our trains. Although no commitments yet been made by government to electrify the railway, we need to make sure it aligns with relevant policy and complies with relevant legislation related to net zero carbon. And in terms of what that means for sustainable energy for trains, for example, in 2018, the government challenged the rail industry to produce a vision for the removal of all diesel trains from the network by 2040. And to support this and indeed net zero carbon, we're exploring options for the long-term fleet and really how we can go about introducing new and emerging technologies to support this. Protected species, yet another key issue for us. We're surveying for protected species at the moment. As part of preparing a environmental statement, we'll need to include in-depth baseline of information, which will include the information collected through field survey work. Our survey programme, ecology survey programme, commenced in May of last year, and it's ongoing across a range of different survey types, but in particular so far, a number of ecology survey types, but also a reasonably significant amount of non-intrusive heritage surveys have also been undertaken, and as I say, they will continue over the course of this year and beyond. Looking at managing impacts on farms and land holdings, we're really looking where we can to avoid areas of the highest grade agricultural land and exploring ways to reduce that impact of the railway on agricultural practices and soil resources. So we want to understand how to minimise that impact, and we'll be commencing a programme of farm business interviews with landowners and tenants, really to help us understand how the land is used, and we'll then look to consider that as part of our ongoing design process. And finally on these slides, but also really importantly, from a community perspective, we're thinking about the impacts on the community and really how we can eliminate, minimise or mitigate disruption to local people, to the communities and of course to the environment. Now we obviously want to avoid significant adverse effects on health and quality of life, so we're considering a range of aspects from sound, noise and vibration, as well as public rights of way, land and property requirements and so on. And all these things are getting detailed consideration, are very much at the forefront of our minds as we continue our design. Next slide please. So now I just want to pick up on a couple really of issues that have come through fairly strongly in the feedback we've received so far. So a couple of questions to touch on. The first is, if you're avoiding environmental impact, why are you risking harm to the rare bat population in Eversdens? What mitigations are in place to preserve them? So it's a great question. And so thank you for that. But there are a small number of known barber-style bat colonies in Cambridgeshire, including the colony that's mentioned there in Wimpole and Eversden Woods, which is a special area of conservation. It's located within our preferred route option area and within 3 to 4 kilometres of the route alignments between Bedford and Cambridge that we're currently consulting on. Potential impacts on the colony in Wimpole Woods is a key theme we've heard about in this consultation, as I mentioned. And as a result, we actually have published a specific fact sheet on this issue on our website. So it is there available on the website if you want more information on it. It's worth noting that the potential route alignments that we've identified do not directly affect any of the woodlands in which barber-style bats are currently known to roost. And in relation to where the bats may forage or commute, We've been carrying out extensive surveys to provide a detailed picture of their behaviour and of the populations living near or alongside the railway. And so based on those surveys, our design would look to include, if it was necessary, some measures that have been used successfully elsewhere, such as creating large and unlit culverts, underpasses, or potentially green bridges to allow bats to safely pass from one side of the railway to another. We'll also, where we can, look to provide enhancement measures such as new improved foraging habitat and commuting routes, and also some additional roosting opportunities. Now, details of our environmental surveys will be included in our environmental statement. That's part of the planning process, and we'll also need to show as part of that how we can mitigate any potential impacts we identify. It's also worth noting, I think, that all the measures put in place will be done in collaboration with Natural England and will become binding obligations under a development consent order. So hopefully that's in part or help to address that question. The second question relates to building embankment. So to build an embankment of 10 metres high and 45 metres wide and 45 metres wide for kilometres in length, how does this square with any pretense to being environmentally conscious? So again, good question. It's been a really important issue. I've had lots of questions around this. And I think it is worth saying that in truth, there have been quite a few inaccuracies being published about it. First, I want to emphasise the assumption about kilometres long stretch of 10 metre high embankment is not true. The overall height of the embankment in this section of the route could reach 10 metres in some places, but we're absolutely not talking about a single long stretch of 10 metre high embankment going on for several kilometres. And of course, as with all our proposals, the impact of the environment is a fundamental part of our decision making, including any possible mitigations. And this would of course include things such as considering noise and visual impact, and noise and visual impact assessments would form part of our environmental impact assessment process. The preliminary findings of that would be incorporated into our preliminary environmental information report, which will be shared as part of our next consultation, and within the full EIA, which will be reported in our environmental statement and be submitted along with our DCO application. In terms of noise, of course, we will be in line with the government's noise policy, and therefore seeking to avoid or minimise negative impacts on health and quality of life of local residents along the entire length of East West Rail route. And so in terms of noise, for example, we're committed to measures that will help reduce noise and vibration, and that can include things such as our choice of trains. Some trains are noisier than others, so that's an area we can look at. Similarly, track technology. Again, track technology can influence noise. And of course, there are a number of other mitigations we can consider. Noise barriers being a key one, and it may be appropriate to look to install noise barriers in certain parts of the route to help mitigate any potential noise that we can't mitigate through other means. I think, and I hope that's helped answer that question, and that takes me to the end of the questions we're going to deal with specifically on environment. So I was going to hand over at this point, I think, to Maria.
Thanks, Michael, and hello again, everybody. I'm going to take you through some of the specific questions that we've had in relation to freight and freight operation on East West Railway. And it's been a topic of huge discussion in the local communities, and so I'm going to be able to provide you with a little bit more information on the specific questions that we've had through. But firstly, I wanted to start by talking through some of the potential reasons for why this railway should carry freight, and there are many reasons of which you can see here on the slide, but the modal shift that it creates and the environmental benefits that result from freight are something that we have to take into consideration as part of our scheme. But absolutely, we are conscious that we need to balance the benefits that could be brought about by freight operation with the needs and the feedback from the local communities who it could potentially impact. So there are some facts there on the slide in front of you around the congestion that is removed from roads and the safety implications as well, not least the benefits to the overall UK economy. But I should start by saying that there is existing freight on the parts of our route that exist today. So particularly in the Oxford area, also between Bletchley and Bedford and into Bedford and at the Cambridge end of the route. So for example, in Bedford at the moment, there is around an 18-hour window of operation during the day and into the evening that freight does operate towards the western section of section D that we're talking about this evening. So again, what are our plans for freight? We do have an objective of supporting existing freight services, as I've just talked through, and we're looking at how we could make provision for potential future demand. So we are building a railway that is freight capable, but what does that mean? That means that we are looking at the potential future demand, and myself and the team are in discussions with the freight operating companies to understand if that demand exists. But ultimately, we are here to run a passenger railway. That is our mandate from government. And one of the exercises that my team is carrying out at the moment is a full timetable for the end-to-end route from Oxford to Cambridge. And that is our priority, to be able to accommodate the incremental services that will be run on our railway through to connection stage 3, which will include 4 trains an hour out of Cambridge and an additional 2 trains an hour between Oxford and Milton Keynes. So what that means is that we look to accommodate passenger services first, and then if there are paths available between those passenger services that wouldn't interfere or put at risk a reliable service of the passenger services. So all of this is part of our study on freight. And it is absolutely our intention when we come to the statutory consultation part of our scheme to be able to share widely with you our findings from that strategy and the ongoing discussions that we're having with the freight industry. One of the other things that we need to consider is additional changes to the existing railway network for services at the eastern end at Cambridge and the western end at Oxford, and if there would be implications for the existing infrastructure in order for our railway and our part of the route to be able to operate freight. Thank you. So we've had a couple of questions on freight. Is it mainly a passenger or a freight railway? I have briefly covered that just in my explanation there, but I think it's really important to say that we know this is a key issue. As I said, our mandate from government is to provide a reliable clock face departure, which means at regular intervals every hour. And so we don't want to put at risk the connectivity that we're set up to achieve for local communities and across the Oxford to Cambridge arc. We've also had questions in around there's no community within a few miles of the Camborne South Cambridge rail line that isn't going to be affected by 24-hour freight noise. So I'm here to say today that it is absolutely not our plan to operate freight 24 hours a day on this railway. In our customer experience and railway operations part of the consultation document on page 33, if memory serves me right, we do talk through our proposed hours of operation, and that includes passenger and freight services. So in terms of 24-hour freight noise, that's not part of our plan. And we understand that it's not something that we want to worry or concern the local communities. In terms of overall freight noise during the day, as Michael touched upon, there's ways and means that we can mitigate that noise, and we'll look to do that if we need to as part of the development of the scheme into the next phase. But if you do want to talk to me specifically or my team, if you've got further questions on freight or more specific questions on other topics of operation, be it electrification or rolling stock or stations, please do join the live chat events, and myself and one of the team or one of the team will be there to answer your questions. So I'll now hand over. Thank you. Over to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Maria. I'm Jeff Leffick. I'm the Delivery Director for Connection Stage 3, which is the section of the railway from Bedford to Cambridge. There were a number of questions raised earlier about route options, and in case you can't read them, I'll just read them out before answering them. So it says, please say something about how the A603 is traversed and the impact on the elevation of the railway behind the Eversdens. So at the moment, the current design, and we're at a very preliminary stage, the railway is going over the top of the A603 on a bridge. And the elevation of the railway behind the Eversdens is typically 3 to 5 meters, but it goes up to 8 meters where it reaches the A603. And the reason for this is that we need enough clearance to get over the road. So the road is not going to move, but in the current scheme, but the railway will go over the top of it. There's a couple of things to bear in mind when we're talking about railway alignments, particularly vertical alignments. You'd probably be aware, like motorways, railways don't tend to have hills in them. The gradients are very gentle. Trains don't like going up and down steep hills. It's not very good for the service. It's not comfortable for passengers, but it will also delay journeys. So gradients are very gradual, and it means that in any particular location, the constraints on the elevation will be local, but they'll also have to do with things that are happening maybe 2 or 3 miles away in either direction. So changing the vertical alignment of a railway is not a simple and straightforward matter about addressing the issue, for example, at the A603. What we've designed at this stage is what we call the reasonable worst case. So and then we go from there and we look at how we can improve the design and give greater benefit to users and neighbours and others affected by the railway. And this is known as a value management exercise, and we've commenced this process now. And as we go into detailed design, we will be making small and perhaps quite large changes to the railway design. And we are looking at how we might bring the vertical alignment down. And if we were able to bring the alignment down at the location, the A603, then we would have to build a bridge for the road to take the road over the railway. So these are things that are actively being looked at, but it is important to remember that we have other constraints. So the Office of Rail and Road, this is what used to be known as the rail regulator. They set the rules for development of railways in this country, and they will not allow new level crossings to be installed. In fact, the direction of travel is the opposite. Level crossings are gradually being removed across the country because they cause delay and quite frankly, they are potentially dangerous. So we can't put level crossings in. If we bring the alignment down, then we have other challenges. We can't bring it down to say 3 meters and get over a road because we won't have enough clearance. So these are some of the issues that we're dealing with. The next issue, the next bullet says that the section between the A428 crossing at the Eversdens has a lot of embankments. Your policy is to make the railway low where possible. CBRR have proposed putting it in a trough as widely used around the world. Why is this not possible? Won't there be a lot of avoidable noise for villages near the Eversdens? Well, we could look at a trough as a solution. I've worked over the past 25 years all over the world on major rail projects, and I would have to say that I don't believe that a trough is widely used. Troughs are used where there's really no other alternative. There are a number of reasons for that. They're very expensive. They require a lot of digging, a lot of cutting. We'd have to put that fill somewhere, you know, we'd be making artificial hills in the Cambridgeshire countryside, which we certainly don't want to do. But we would also use an enormous amount of concrete. We are committed to carbon net zero, as you heard from Michael earlier. Concrete is the single biggest contributor in construction to carbon emissions. So to minimize concrete use for no other reason would be one reason not to go for a trough. We are going through a number of floodplains. There would be some pretty serious technical challenges to going to a trough. But having said that, and as I said earlier, and as the questioner has noted, our policy is to make the railway as low as possible, and we certainly are doing that. On the issue of noise, again, I think an assumption that because you put a train in a trough, it's somehow quieter, is actually likely to be the opposite. With the reverberation and structure-borne noise that could be generated in a concrete trough, it could actually be a noisier solution for neighbours. But this is something we're looking at very carefully about noise mitigation, how to control noise. We may well be looking at noise barriers. We may well be looking at tree plantings in order to attenuate noise breakout. But these will be new trains on new track, the very latest technology. They're considerably quieter than traditional technical solutions. So I think, you know, there will be noise coming off the trains. I think it will be much less than many people might imagine, and then we will take steps to mitigate further. The last bullet on this page, is there a further route alignment option to use the existing St. Neots station rather than build a new station to the south? What are the implications for current train services to London from existing St. Neots station if an additional station is built? Will trains stop at both? Will there be reduced services, etc.? We did look at whether we should connect to the East Coast Main Line at St. Neots at the existing station. There are a number of issues there, though. It's a very built-up area, and if we were to come through with our rail alignment at right angles to East Coast Main Line, we would need to demolish a tremendous amount of housing and go through parklands, etc. Another alternative might be to drop down and actually join the East Coast Main Line and then branch off it again. This is technically challenging from an operations perspective because it means introducing trains onto a very, very busy line and then taking them off again without disrupting the existing services. So again, it's an option that we do not prefer. We are in the business of developing new housing, and so we've tended to try to keep away from going through and demolishing housing. It seems a little counterintuitive. There is no plan to change the services at the current St. Neots station. We are working with the GTR and with Network Rail about East Coast Mainline operations, and we're looking to have the least impact possible. Will we stop at both stations? Very likely, not necessarily the same trains, but the plan would be to limit the impact to the existing services as much as possible. I don't know whether Maria would like to jump in with an additional response to that, yeah, since we're now straying to operations.
Thanks, Jeff. Yes, you're correct. My team and I have been having conversations with GTR, who obviously operate the services right now out of London on that line and operate the station, to make sure that any of the plans that we're developing complement their future plans. Will East-West rail trains stop at both stations? The answer is no, but one of the things that we're working on as part of our customer experience planning is how we can provide connectivity between those two stations. So if anybody has any specific feedback on the new station that we're proposing and how we can link in with the existing St Neots station, then please respond as part of that, as part of the consultation, and we'll take your views into consideration and make sure we build that into our plans and our discussions with GTR. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Maria. That's a team answer. And I think now we'll hand back to Will.
Thanks very much, Jeff. So as we now move on to the next slide, I'm not sure I can see this. I don't know whether people can see the slides moving. I'm not quite sure the slides have moved. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. We wanted to address your questions about the approaches into Cambridge and some questions about why a northern route to Cambridge isn't being actively considered. So if we move on to the next slide, I think it is worth saying that, you know, in the 2019 non-statutory consultation that we did, we consulted on 5 route options. You know, all 5 of them approach Cambridge from the south, and that was for a variety of engineering, operational, economic and environmental reasons. But we did, as part of that consultation, ask whether people felt that we'd been right to prioritise routes that approached Cambridge from the south. And we did get, so there was an opportunity there for people to provide us with the feedback based upon some analysis that we set out at the time. You know, and I think it is fair to say that, you know, we did get some responses that stated a preference for approaching Cambridge from the north, but that certainly wasn't all the responses. It was fairly balanced, actually, but our overall conclusion was that approaching Cambridge from the south remained our preference, and that was what we confirmed and set out the reasons for confirming that when we announced our preferred route option back in January of last year. You know, and I think it is just worth saying that it has been feedback from communities and stakeholders during the consultation that has really helped to inform our decisions to recommend route option E, as we said at the time, as the preferred route option, and it's in that route option that we're now developing our alignments. So as we move on to the next slide, you know, what we have done, and we've set this out in quite considerable detail, you know, tens of pages. I think it might even run to 70 pages in some areas of analysis on the in Appendix F of the technical report. You know, we look at the analysis on both a northern approach into Cambridge as well as a southern approach, and we do conclude that our southern approach remains our preference, that there's no information that would lead us to change our conclusion, and that's for a number of reasons. The first is that it does remain, you know, a shorter distance, only marginally so, but it is a shorter distance to approach Cambridge from the south, and it will have shorter journey times. It requires us to build less infrastructure on floodplains with fewer embankments and viaducts, and you know, that means quite a lot less substantial foundations and earthwork stabilizations that would be necessary. You know, approaching Cambridge from the north also requires, you know, quite a significant number of property acquisitions and demolitions, between 39 and 84 coming in from the north, which is quite different from the approach coming in from the south, where the number is 5. And there are sort of considerable benefits of serving the 20,000 jobs that are being created on the biomedical campus that will be served by the Cambridge South Station, and making sure, you know, there are good, you know, connectivity links to that area from places, you know, for example, in Cambourne, but also from further afield as well. And we think that is sort of preferable to a station, for example, say at Oakington for Northstowe, where that is some distance from the Northstowe development itself, and also is already served by public transport that has capacity to service its growth, and that has a similar sort of frequency and journey time to that which East West Rail would be offering. So we do see the greater additional benefits from serving Cambridge South as well. So those are the reasons why we've sort of confirmed our conclusion that the southern approach remains the right one. There is opportunity in the consultation for people to respond on the information that we've provided and to provide their comments, but you can see just looking at the data table that we've produced there, both in terms of distance, in terms of the length that we would need to build in the flood zone, in terms of the total amount of viaducts that we would be going near. Also, when you look at the number of properties within 200 meters of the alignment, significantly more on the northern approach. And when you look at road crossings, pretty similar overall, so no material difference or material benefit to taking the northern approach over the southern. And then you can see that quite stark data on the number of properties affected as well. So if we move on to the question, and just sort of pick up some of the questions. So there's a point here about why are we so committed to a southern route which runs on a 10-meter high embankment, twice as high as the Great Wall of China, for 17 kilometers and takes freight through the historic centre of Cambridge. So I think just a couple of things to say on that. It certainly isn't the case that we have embankments that are running for 17 kilometers at 10 meters high. I think our longest individual stretch of embankment is about 1.8 kilometers, so not 17, but there is a stretch of embankments and cuttings and viaducts on that approach into Cambridge from Camborne, but they are not running consistently at 10 meters high for 17 kilometers. There are times when the embankments do sort of reach that height, but I think it is worth saying that at the moment we are offering a reasonable worst case scenario, and we will be working very hard to reduce the height where we can, because I think, as others have said, it is more cost effective for us, let alone we our sort of desire not to disrupt local communities, to reduce the height of embankments. I also just want to touch on this sort of taking freight through the historic centre of Cambridge. Well, again, just a couple of points. Freight already passes through Cambridge Station. There are quite a number of freight paths that are already there, and if there is more freight that comes as a consequence of East West Rail, it is going to be a relatively marginal increase on the amount of freight that is already passing along the West Anglia main line through Cambridge. So I think it is not, we should be absolutely clear, it is not East West Rail that is introducing freight through Cambridge. That already exists. And in terms of the route that the railway line takes, as I say, we are using the route of the West Anglian main line, which certainly when I was living in Cambridge sort of didn't run through the historic centre. So I say that not to be difficult, but I do think it's important that we bust some of the myths that are out there. Moving on to the next question, why are we saying that the northern approach requires too many embankments and viaducts when the southern approach requires this too? I think the point that we're making there is that we are, we're building, or would need to build, on the northern approach very significantly more in the floodplain, and that does have an impact upon the amount of viaduct that you need and the work you need to do on embankments. So it is, I just think it is worth noting that really is one of the reasons why we don't think taking that northern approach is appropriate. So it's not necessarily that you've got sort of more in one area than the other, because they will both have embankments and they will both have viaducts, but it is the nature of the viaducts and the embankments that you're building and whether they're in floodplain or not. And some of the visual impacts of those in the north would potentially be worse than those in the south as well. So we do need to take that into account. And then finally, on this section, why are we not putting efforts into exploring more than one northern approach? You are discounting it without even considering it properly. So I think it is, we have tried to take forward, our analysis on a northern approach, which we set out in Appendix X, in Appendix F. I don't think that is not considering it properly. We have done quite a considerable amount of analysis on it and set it out in that appendix, and people are very welcome to comment on that. We did look at what the options are around the northern approach in terms of what the potential alignments might be, and the one we've put forward to do our analysis on is the one that we thought was the most likely to was likely the best option of the northern approaches, and as far as I'm aware, it aligns pretty well with what those who are campaigning for a northern approach sort of have as their preferred alignment too. So we did look at a number of options, but we've put that one forward as the likely best one, and we've done the analysis on that as set out in Appendix F. So I think it again is important that we're clear. As we move on to the next slide, I think I'm handing over to Jorn to talk about landowners.
Thank you, Will. So good evening, everyone. My name's Jörn Pace. I'm Land and Property Manager for East West Rail. I'm going to talk over some pertinent information for landowners. So during this consultation, we've been meeting with landowners whose land could be potentially required for our proposals. And within these meetings, we've been able to explain the proposals further, the project timeframes, the statutory provisions which would be available to landowners, and the next steps. And through speaking to landowners and the wider community, this feedback also helps us understand the land use and how we can keep our negative impact as minimal as possible. And moving on to our proposed need to sell scheme. We thank those who have given feedback on this so far. As a reminder for those who aren't familiar with it, we're consulting on a scheme which would provide support to those who have a pressing need to sell, but who are unable to due to our proposals and at a reduced rate. So to answer some of the questions we've been receiving on this, the purchase would be for the unaffected market value of the property, that there isn't a set distance in which it applies, and if introduced, it would be at the preferred route alignment announcement point, which is expected to be later this year. We really value your feedback on it, so please do get in touch. Let us know if you think it's the right mitigation, and if it's not, what support would you like to see? There's further information on our website. We have a number of leaflets which discuss the need to sell scheme, as well as other matters such as compulsory purchase, compensation and blight. And we have a team who can talk you through each of these areas. So do get in contact through our channels or attend one of our live chat events where you can talk with one of our experts. So I'm now going to hand back to Claire, who's going to discuss the consultation further.
Thanks very much, Jan. So how can you get involved? Well, we have virtual consultation rooms on our website. If you haven't already taken a look, please do go. They've got lots and lots of information. And there's so much information on the consultation on our website. And there are lots of different ways you can get involved. We've talked about live chat events. So we've got at least 10 between now and the end of our consultation on the 9th of June, 2 to 3 a week. So that's your opportunity to come along armed with your questions to speak to our experts. So you'll find the live chat function within the virtual consultation room on our website. We're also very aware that not everybody is online and not everybody is comfortable being in a digital space. So, and we've noticed that one of your questions tonight was asking about those people who don't wish to engage digitally. So the way we would like to hear from you is through our telephone. We've got a team of people waiting to take your calls. So please pick up the phone, and again, we will look forward to speaking to you about the consultation and answering your questions. Also, similarly, if you know anyone, a neighbour or anyone else within your community who isn't online or wouldn't engage digitally, please do pass on the telephone number and encourage them to get involved and in touch. We're really pleased that we've had lots of consultation responses to date, but we want as many as possible. It's really important to hear from you, to hear your suggestions, and we really ask you to please do get in touch. And moving on to the feedback form, there's one online, and you can send your feedback forms online by emailing us at consultation@eastwestrail.co.uk, or you can send it to us by post at our free post address. You can request a paper copy of the form. So again, you can email us at contact@eastwestrail.co.uk for a copy of a paper copy of the feedback form, or please call us on this number. We're really looking forward to hearing from you. Next slide, please. So what's next? Next slide, please. So really it's about keeping in touch. We've got a series of more webinars this week on different sections of the route, different geographical sections. We've got a host of online events. Please visit our virtual consultation room. There's lots and lots of information online. If you'd like it printed, please drop us an email or call us up asking for copies of the printed material, or you can go onto our website and it's a bit like a shop. You can just put different documents into a shopping basket and we will send these documents to you. So thank you very, very much for your time this evening, and we look forward to hearing from you, and we look forward to speaking with you. So I'll say goodbye from the whole of the team now, and we wish you a good evening, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future. Many thanks.